There's a phase INFJs go through where they look back and barely recognize who they used to be, not because of sudden change, but because of constant internal evolution. The way they think, what they value, how they see people. It all shifts quietly over time until one day it feels like they've become a completely different person. What makes this confusing is how fast it happens internally compared to how slow it appears externally. Others still see the same person, the same behavior, the same identity. But inside, the INFJ has already moved through layers of growth, reflection, and adjustment. They don't just change habits, they change perspectives, priorities, and the way they experience reality itself. In this video, we're breaking down why INFJs often feel like a different person every year and what's really happening during this phase of constant internal transformation, the hidden patterns behind it, the psychological shifts, and why it can feel both powerful and isolating at the same time. If you've ever felt like you're outgrowing your own past version faster than others expect, stay until the end. And subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind for more insights into the silent evolution most people never notice. They constantly reevaluate their beliefs and perspectives. Continuous reevaluator, internal questioning, beliefs in motion. There is a moment when the INFJ realizes that what they once believed no longer feels fully aligned, not because it was wrong, but because something deeper has shifted. A new insight, a different perspective, a pattern they didn't see before. It changes how everything connects. And instead of holding on to the old belief for comfort, they begin questioning it, quietly, thoroughly, without needing external pressure. This process is constant. The INFJ does not treat beliefs as fixed points. They treat them as structures that can evolve. What made sense before is re-examined under a new understanding. What felt true is tested against new experiences. And this doesn't happen occasionally. It happens repeatedly. Each new layer of awareness reshapes the previous one. Each realization adjusts the way they interpret reality, and because of that, their perspective is never static. From the outside, this shift is almost invisible. The INFJ may still appear the same, still speak in a familiar way, still act consistently. But internally, their framework is changing. The way they see people, situations, even themselves, is being updated continuously. What they once accepted easily, they now question. What they once ignored, they now analyze. And what they once believed firmly, they now hold with flexibility. What makes this powerful is how deep it goes. The INFJ is not just adjusting opinions, they are restructuring understanding. They are refining how they interpret meaning, how they connect ideas, how they define truth, and this level of internal movement creates a sense of constant evolution. They are not staying the same long enough to feel stable in one version of themselves. Over time, this leads to a quiet transformation. The INFJ looks back and sees that their beliefs have shifted, their perspective has expanded, their understanding has deepened. And with each shift, they feel slightly different, not disconnected from who they were, but no longer fully aligned with it either. Because for the INFJ, growth is not something that happens occasionally. It is something that happens continuously. And when your perspective keeps evolving, staying the same is no longer possible. They outgrow old identities that no longer feel aligned. Old identity, misaligned self. Quiet release. There is a moment when the INFJ looks at who they used to be and feels the distance. Not rejection, not regret, just a clear awareness that it no longer fits. The habits, the mindset, the way they once moved through the world, it all feels slightly out of place now. And instead of forcing themselves to stay consistent with that version, they begin letting it go. This shift is not sudden. It builds over time. The INFJ notices small misalignments first. Thoughts that no longer feel true, reactions that don't match who they are becoming, values that begin to shift quietly. These signals don't stay ignored. They accumulate, forming a clear understanding that something has changed internally. And once that change becomes undeniable, holding on to the old identity no longer feels natural. From the outside, this can seem confusing. The INFJ may appear different without explanation. Their preferences shift, their responses change, their priorities realign. Others may still see them through the lens of who they were before, expecting the same behavior, the same reactions. But internally, that version has already been processed, understood, and released. What others are holding on to is something the INFJ has already moved beyond. What makes this process continuous is how often it repeats. The INFJ doesn't evolve once and stabilize. They evolve in layers. Each new level of awareness brings another shift, another adjustment, another version of themselves that no longer feels aligned. And each time, they go through the same process, recognizing, understanding, and quietly letting go. Over time, this creates the feeling of becoming a different person, not because they are disconnected from their past, but because they are not attached to it. They allow themselves to change without forcing consistency with who they used to be, because for the INFJ, identity is not something fixed. It is something that evolves with understanding. And when that understanding changes, the identity that once held it naturally changes too. They process past experiences and redefine their meaning. Past revisited, meaning redefined. Internal narrative shifts. There is a moment when the INFJ looks back at something that once felt clear and sees it differently. The event hasn't changed. The words that were said, the actions that happened, they remain the same. But the meaning behind them begins to shift. A new perspective, a deeper understanding, a connection that wasn't visible before, and suddenly, the past feels different. This process is continuous. The INFJ does not leave experiences in the past as fixed memories. They revisit them, not to relive them, but to understand them more deeply. What once felt confusing becomes clear. What once felt personal becomes contextual. What once felt unresolved begins to make sense. And with each new layer of understanding, the meaning attached to that experience evolves. From the outside, nothing seems to change. The past is the past. The event already happened. But internally, the INFJ is still processing it. They are connecting it to who they are now, to what they've learned since then, to patterns they've recognized over time. And because of that, the same experience doesn't stay the same. It becomes something new, shaped by the understanding they've gained. What makes this powerful is how it reshapes identity. The INFJ is not just remembering the past, they are redefining it. They are changing what it represents, what it taught them, how it fits into their story. And when the meaning of past experiences changes, their sense of self changes with it. Over time, this creates a feeling of transformation. The INFJ looks back and realizes that even their past feels different now. Not because it was erased, but because it was understood more clearly. And with that clarity, the emotional weight shifts, the perspective evolves, the identity adjusts. Because for the INFJ, the past is not static. It is something that continues to unfold internally. And each time they revisit it with deeper awareness, they don't just remember it, they redefine it. They change priorities based on deeper self-awareness, shifting priorities, deeper awareness, realignment in motion. There is a moment when the INFJ realizes that what once mattered no longer holds the same weight, not because it lost value entirely, but because something more aligned has taken its place. The goals they once chased, the things they once prioritized, the direction they once followed. All of it begins to feel slightly misaligned with who they are becoming. This shift doesn't come from external influence. It comes from internal clarity. The INFJ begins to understand themselves at a deeper level. What drains them, what fulfills them, what feels true, what feels forced. And as that understanding grows, their priorities adjust naturally. They don't force change. They respond to it. What once felt important begins to fade, and what once felt distant begins to move forward. From the outside, this can seem inconsistent. The INFJ may change direction, step away from things they once committed to, or pursue something that doesn't match their past behavior. Others may not see the internal process behind it, the reflection, the realization, the clarity that led to that shift. But for the INFJ, the decision is not sudden. It is the result of continuous awareness building over time. What makes this process powerful is that it is not temporary. Once the INFJ reaches a deeper level of self-understanding, they cannot return to previous priorities that no longer align. Even if those priorities once made sense, they now feel disconnected from their current perspective. And maintaining something that feels misaligned requires effort they are no longer willing to invest. Over time, this creates a pattern of evolution. The INFJ's direction changes, not randomly, but intentionally. Each shift reflects a deeper understanding of who they are and what matters to them. And once the end is in the way you've time changes in a way you've tired SC, and the causes for the INFJ, priorities are not fixed, they are guided by awareness. And when awareness deepens, what matters changes with it, naturally, inevitably, and permanently. They detach from environments that don't match their growth. Misaligned environment, internal resistance, quiet detachment. There is a moment when the INFJ feels it clearly. Something no longer fits. The space they're in, the people around them, the patterns they're part of. Everything may look the same externally, but internally, something shifts. What once felt natural now feels restrictive. What once felt comfortable now feels limiting. And that awareness doesn't fade, it grows. This realization doesn't come suddenly, it builds over time. The INFJ begins to notice small signs first, conversations that no longer resonate, dynamics that feel repetitive, environments that don't allow them to expand. These signals don't stay ignored, they accumulate, forming a clear understanding that the space they're in no longer aligns with who they are becoming. And once the clarity is reached, staying the same becomes more uncomfortable than changing. From the outside, this detachment is often invisible at first. The INFJ continues to show up, continues to participate, continues to appear present, but internally, they have already stepped back. They begin reducing their emotional investment, their engagement, their attachment to that environment. Not out of rejection, not out of negativity, but out of alignment. They are no longer connected in the same way. What makes this process powerful is that it is not reactive. The INFJ doesn't leave because something dramatic happened. They leave because something subtle changed internally. The environment didn't necessarily become worse, it simply stopped matching their level of growth, and once that mismatch becomes clear, they cannot ignore it. Over time, this leads to a quiet exit, sometimes gradual, sometimes more defined, but always intentional. The INFJ doesn't force themselves to stay in a space that no longer supports who they are becoming. They don't hold on to familiarity at the cost of alignment, because for the INFJ, growth is not optional. And when an environment no longer supports that growth, detachment is not a loss. It is a necessary step forward. They integrate new insights that reshape how they see everything. New insight, internal shift, reality restructured. There is a moment when the INFJ understands something, and nothing looks the same afterward. It's not just a new idea. It's a realization that connects multiple layers at once: past experiences, current patterns, future possibilities. And once that connection is made, it doesn't stay isolated. It spreads, reshaping how everything else is interpreted. This integration is deep and immediate. The INFJ doesn't store insights as separate pieces of information. They absorb them into their entire framework. One realization changes how they see people. It changes how they understand situations. It even changes how they interpret their own past. What once felt clear is re-examined under this new understanding. What once made sense is now seen differently. And because this happens internally, it feels like a shift in perspective rather than an addition of knowledge. From the outside, this transformation is almost invisible. The INFJ may still appear the same, still act in familiar ways, still engage as usual, but internally, their perception has already changed. The way they process reality is no longer the same as it was before the insight. They are not just reacting differently, they are seeing differently, and that difference affects everything. What makes this process powerful is how quickly it becomes permanent. Once the INFJ integrates an insight, they cannot return to the previous way of seeing things. Even if they try, the new understanding remains active, influencing how they interpret everything moving forward. It's not something they can ignore or set aside. It becomes part of how they think. Over time, this leads to continuous transformation. Each new insight builds on the last, creating layers of understanding that keep evolving. The INFJ is not just growing in knowledge. They are restructuring their perception of reality again and again. Because for the INFJ, insight is not something they learn. It is something they become. And once they shift happens, the world itself feels different, even if nothing around them is changed. They become more selective about relationships and energy. Selective focus, energy protected, few but deeper connections. There is a moment when the INFJ stops giving the same access to everyone. Not out of distance, not out of judgment, but out of clarity. They begin to notice how different interactions affect them, who drains them, who aligns with them, who feels genuine, and who feels inconsistent. And once they understand, awareness becomes clear. Their openness becomes intentional instead of automatic. This shift is gradual but precise. The INFJ doesn't cut people off suddenly or without thought. They observe patterns over time, how someone shows up, how consistent they are, how their presence feels after the interaction ends. These signals accumulate, forming a clear understanding of which connections feel aligned and which ones don't. And based on that understanding, they begin adjusting their level of access. From the outside, this change can feel subtle at first. The INFJ may still respond, still engage, still maintain contact. But internally, something has shifted. They no longer invest the same energy into every interaction. They choose where to focus, where to engage deeply, and where to remain at a distance, not because they lack care, but because they understand the cost of giving it without alignment. What makes this process powerful is that it is not reversible easily. Once the INFJ recognizes the impact of a connection on their energy, they cannot ignore it. Even if the interaction continues, their level of openness adjusts permanently. They become more intentional, more aware, more selective about where they place their attention. Over time, this creates a different kind of connection. Fewer relationships, but deeper ones. Less constant interaction, but more meaningful presence. The INFJ is no longer trying to maintain every connection. They are choosing the ones that match their growth and understanding. Because for the INFJ, energy is not unlimited. And once they understand where it is best placed, they stop giving it everywhere and start giving it where it truly aligns. They evolve internally faster than others can perceive, rapid inner evolution. Slow external visibility, hidden transformation. There is a moment when the INFJ realizes they have changed, but no one else seems to notice. The way they think is different. What they value has shifted. How they interpret everything has evolved. Yet from the outside, they still look the same voice, the same presence, the same patterns others recognize. And in that contrast, something becomes clear. Their internal change is moving faster than what can be seen. This evolution is continuous and layered. The INFJ doesn't change in obvious steps. They change in depth. One insight leads to another. One realization reshapes a previous belief. One experience alters how they see everything that came before. And because this happens internally, without visible markers, it doesn't translate immediately into external behavior. The change exists, but it isn't fully expressed yet. From the outside, people respond to the version they already know. They expect the same reactions, the same mindset, the same identity. But internally, that version no longer exists in the same way. The INFJ has already moved forward, already adjusted, already evolved past certain perspectives. And when others interact with them as if nothing has changed, it creates a gap, not because the INFJ is disconnected, but because they are no longer aligned with who they used to be. What makes this experience isolating is the delay in recognition. The INFJ feels the change immediately. They understand it, integrate it, live through it internally. But others only see it once it becomes visible externally, and that takes time. During that time, the INFJ exists in a space where their internal reality doesn't match how they are perceived. Over time, this becomes familiar. The INFJ continues evolving, continues shifting, continues redefining themselves internally. And with each change, the gap appears again. The space between who they are now and who others think they still are. Because for the INFJ, growth doesn't wait for visibility. It happens in depth first. And when that depth moves faster than what can be seen, they don't just feel different, they feel ahead of how they are understood. It's not that INFJs are trying to change, it's that they can't stay the same. Their mind keeps evolving, their perspective keeps shifting, and each new layer of understanding quietly replaces the old one. And over time, that creates a feeling that's hard to explain, like you've lived multiple versions of yourself, while the world still sees just one. If you've ever looked back and felt like your past self doesn't fully match who you are now, this is why. Let me know in the comments which of these changes you've experienced the most. And if you want to understand how to navigate this constant evolution without feeling disconnected from your own life, subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind, where growth becomes clarity instead of confusion.